The sixth entry of the Friday the 13th franchise, 1986's Jason Lives, is a notable film for a few reasons. First off, it's the debut of a version of Jason that would become ingrained in people's minds. A literal zombie with superhuman strength who could slowly walk after his intended victims and always catch up to them. Secondly, it was a movie that, one could argue, saved the franchise, or at least set it back on track, after the ill-received, though actually quite awesome, but we'll get to that another day, A New Beginning, which, spoiler alert, didn't feature the actual Jason as the killer. And lastly, it's just a straight up solid film, which easily ranks as one of the best in the series. Sensing the need for a return to the basics, the powers that be tapped director Tom McLoughlin, a talented up-and-comer with a single low-budget horror movie to his name. McLoughlin was given the chance to do pretty much anything he wanted, with one key exception. Whatever else happened, the director needed to bring Jason Voorhees back to life.
I don't know how you talked me into this, Tommy.
You know, if the institution ever found out about this, they would haul our butts back in and straitjacket them. Permanent.
You didn't have to come, Oz. This is between me and Jason.
Jason Lives picks up on the story of Tommy Jarvis and his vendetta against Jason, who at this point has been dead and buried for quite some time. Well, Tommy couldn't leave well enough alone and wants to see and destroy Jason's corpse for himself. He escapes from the institution along with a reluctant friend, and they make their way to the spooky old cemetery to do the deed. Of course, when Tommy sees the corpse, he goes apeshit and stabs it with a metal rod several times. Before he can set the body on fire, lightning strikes the metal rod Frankenstein style, and voila, zombie Jason has arrived. He makes short work of Tommy's friend, and Tommy himself runs off to alert the authorities. Obviously, they don't believe him, and this gives Jason some working room to get back to what he does best. If all this sounds kind of dumb to you, well, you're right, it is. But the key to appreciating Jason Lives is recognizing that the movie is in on the joke. Any claims to self-seriousness are abandoned by the title sequence, which winkingly riffs on the James Bond franchise's iconic gun barrel introduction. Like 007, Jason walks across the frame, stops in the center of the screen, and turns towards the camera, slashing his machete at the same point when Bond would draw his gun and fire. The story itself is essentially just a loose framework for a bevy of kills, but also a bevy of jokes. The most infamous moment in Jason Lives comes when the grumpy graveyard groundskeeper breaks the fourth wall to cheekishly admonish the audience for their bloodlust.
Shitheads couldn't even stick him back in right. Well, I ain't gonna touch this slimy sucker. Why'd they have to go and dig up Jason? Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
And the self-aware gags only multiply from there.
Darren, we better turn around.
Why?
Because I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
But as goofy as Jason Lives turns out to be, it also manages to imbue the movie with some genuine stakes. Even while bringing some slapstick and humorous musings on popular culture to the series, Friday the 13th is still, first and foremost, a horror film. The director took his love of universal monsters and gothic horror and brought a little more style to the proceedings than we had seen in the more point-and-shoot stylings of the previous outings. It makes sense that the writer-director would bring his love of classic horror to a Friday movie, as by this point in the 1980s, Jason, Freddy, and Michael had become the Dracula, Frankenstein, and Wolfman of the MTV era. The director also brings a big-budget sensibility to the low-budget film, with a set piece involving Jason taking out John Travolta's brother and a young lady that appeared to be lifted from a Poison video on a runway RV, climaxing with a victorious Jason standing atop the turned-over vehicle. The entire sequence wouldn't feel out of place in an action flick. And most importantly of all, Jason Lives established the new template for Jason Voorhees. He's now an unstoppable monster who simply cannot be stopped. When Tommy finally manages to dispatch Jason by wrapping a rock around his neck and letting him sink to the bottom of the lake, we cut to reveal Jason is still alive underwater, biding his time until he can get free and start his killing spree once again. If Jason Lives had been more successful, it might have spun the Friday the 13th series in a totally new direction. Self-parodic to the point that Scream, which draws obvious inspiration from it, might have seemed obsolete. But while it was basically impossible to make an unsuccessful Friday the 13th film, Jason Lives missed one key milestone other movies in the franchise had hit: opening top at the box office. On its opening weekend, Jason Lives debuted at number 2, behind the third week of a little movie called Aliens, and ended its run as the lowest grossing movie in the franchise to date. Sad.